Even the blood in the fridge felt warmer than that room. My name is Ellis. I'm 33 years old, and I work as a blood bank technician, or rather, I used to. I took the night shifts by choice. I always told people I liked the solitude. No waiting rooms full of coughing patients, no ringing phones, no doctors barking orders, just me, the hum of machines, and rows of quietly resting blood units waiting to save someone's life. But after 6 years of this job, the silence began to stretch. It wasn't peace, it was pressure, a sort of weight that pressed into my ears when I walked into certain rooms, especially refrigeration unit B. Unit B wasn't used much. It was an old backup, smaller than the others, and always colder. I mean, really cold. Not just temperature, but atmosphere. The moment you opened the steel door, the hairs on your arms would rise, and not from the chill. The first time I noticed something off was about 4 years ago. I was transferring expired blood units from Unit B to the disposal bin. I logged the bags, wheeled them out, and tossed them into the chute. But when I returned the next day, they were back. Same serial numbers, same expiration dates, logged back in. It had to be a system glitch. I deleted the logs manually, moved the bags myself, but 2 nights later, there they were again, resting calmly on the middle shelf, like they had never left. I didn't tell anyone. Who would I tell? The night supervisor was barely conscious behind his desk, and the day crew didn't touch Unit B. I started checking the temperature logs obsessively. Every other room held steady. Unit B fluctuated. Sometimes it dropped to impossible numbers, below freezing, and the blood still didn't coagulate. Then it would spike, like the fridge had a fever. But the worst came last winter. I was doing inventory, same as always, gloves on, clipboard in hand, scanner strapped to my wrist. I opened Unit B, and was immediately hit by a wave of air, so cold it bit through my lab coat. The lights inside flickered, they always did. But this time, one of them blew out completely. With a soft pop, I stepped in. Something was different. It wasn't the temperature, it was the smell. Iron, wet metal, blood, fresh blood, but nothing was leaking. I checked the shelves. Everything was sealed. Then I saw it. A single bag, tucked far in the back, almost behind the coils. It wasn't supposed to be there. I reached for it. My heart stopped. The label read, donor name, Ellis K. blood type, O negative collected, December 11th, 2019, 2:04 a.m. Logged by Ellis K. That was me. My name, my blood type, my login credentials. But I never donated blood. Never. Not even during technician training. I hate needles. And the collection date. It was 2 days ago, at 2:04 a.m. When I was here, alone, inventorying. I stumbled out of the unit, dropped the clipboard. I checked the logs. There it was, my user ID, my biometric stamp, but I had no memory of logging that unit. None. I couldn't sleep that day. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed I was in Unit B, naked, cold, strapped to a gurney. Machines hummed in the dark, and something was extracting blood from my arms, not through needles, but through open skin. I woke up drenched in sweat. My arm ached. There was a faint bruise on my left bicep. I called out sick, then took another night off, but I couldn't stay away. I needed to know if that bag was still there. 2 nights later, I returned. The lab was empty, silent. I walked to Unit B. The hallway lights dimmed behind me. As I moved, one by one, The temperature dropped with every step. I opened the unit. There were 5 bags now, all labeled with my name, all load negative, logged on different dates, all after hours. My login each time. I fell to my knees. Something inside me cracked. I realized something horrible. This wasn't a glitch. I was doing this, but I wasn't awake when I did. Something or someone was taking me, using me, but it wasn't possession. It was memory, suppressed. I remembered now. My mother, ICU. She needed blood urgently. O negative. The hospital was short. They begged for donors. I was here. I had just come off a 14-hour shift. I said I was too tired. I said someone else could do it. She died 4 hours later. I never forgave myself, but I buried it. Kept working. Compartmentalized. Sealed the grief. Like we seal the blood bags. Airtight. Sterile. But something remembered. That night. I stayed. I sat outside Unit B until sunrise. The compressor inside droned like a voice, humming a song I'd forgotten. I didn't open the door. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside, knew what would keep appearing. I haven't entered that room since. I locked the door and told the admin. It was malfunctioning. They believed me. I still work nights, but I avoid the East Wing entirely. The hallway past Unit B is always colder, and sometimes, when I pass too close, I hear the compressor click on, like a heartbeat resuming. Some nights, I wake up at home, drenched in sweat, with a bruise on my arm, and the faintest scent of iron in my nose. I haven't donated blood, but maybe I have, and maybe, just maybe, the room is keeping score. Even the blood in the fridge felt warmer than that room, because that room didn't just store blood. It remembered it. It remembered me. There's something unnatural about the stillness in the blood storage room after midnight. It's too quiet, like the world outside has stopped breathing. The hum of the refrigerator units becomes a sort of lullaby, constant, low, like a distant chant. Sometimes, if you stand there long enough, you forget you're among blood bags. You forget they were once part of people. My name is Isaac. I'm 38 years old, and until last spring, I worked as a night technician at St. Rowena's blood bank. I was dependable, quiet, and rarely spoke more than I needed to. I liked the solitude, or maybe I convinced myself I did, because being alone with numbers and samples was easier than being alone with people. The night shift fit me, but it didn't stay quiet forever. The night it started, the air in the unit felt heavier than usual. I chalked it up to bad ventilation and carried on. Temperature checks, label audits, logging delivery timings, routine, until the weight of that silence became something else. Not oppressive, not loud, just watching. At 2:17 a.m., I was preparing a unit transfer for the neonatal department. Blood type O, urgent. I went to fridge C2, but the moment I opened the door, the lights flickered, just once, and then held steady. What unnerved me wasn't the flicker, it was the reflection I saw on the glass surface of the unit. My own, sure, but behind it, something faint, a shimmer, like movement. And yet, when I turned around, I was alone. I told myself it was fatigue. Shift work messes with your mind. I logged the unit and moved on. But from that night forward, it kept happening. Always just past 2 a.m. Always when I accessed fridge C2, the shimmer evolved into more distinct shapes. A figure, vague at first, then sharper. A woman maybe, long hair, pale shoulders, but only ever in reflections, never in the room itself. I became obsessed. Each night, I found a reason to open C2, just to look, just to see if she would appear again. And she did, every time. A little clearer. I never told anyone, not my supervisor, not the nurses. You learn early in blood work to keep things clinical. Emotion doesn't belong here. But I felt her, in a way that wasn't entirely fear. It was like sadness. Her image didn't scream or beg. She just stood, watching me, pleading without moving. Eventually, I did some digging through the internal archive system. A nurse friend of mine owed me a favor. I asked about accidents involving storage fridges, particularly C2. She hesitated, then sent me an old unsent maintenance memo from 2004. Apparently, there had been a malfunction. A technician, female, was locked inside C2 during a power reroute. The seals held tight, no alarms triggered. She wasn't found until hours later. They said it was painless, hypothermia, maybe even unconsciousness before the end. But they never reclassified the fridge. They just repaired the lock and kept using it. That should have been my cue to leave, but I couldn't. Something in me needed to keep seeing her, as though acknowledging her made me responsible for her memory, as though by looking back, I was the only one who hadn't forgotten. One night, during a storm, the lights failed completely. Backup power buzzed alive, but dimly. Emergency strips along the floor cast the room in a reddish hue. The fridges continued humming. I stood before C2, unsure whether to open it. Then I heard it, from inside. Not a scream, not a voice, just a faint, rhythmic thump, like someone knocking softly, over and over. A heartbeat, almost. I stood there, paralyzed, until it stopped. The backup lights returned, and I opened the fridge door in one movement. She wasn't in the reflection this time. She wasn't anywhere. Instead, I found something else, tucked behind the labeled units. A small piece of paper, old yellowed. On it was a single word, written in what looked like red pen. Cold. That's when I started dreaming about her. Every night. The same dream. I'm walking into the blood bank, but everything is covered in frost. My hands are numb. I open C2, and she's inside. Not dead, just waiting. Eyes open, a mouth frozen in the shape of a whisper. She doesn't move, doesn't scream, just looks at me like she knows me, like she's waiting for me to do something I've forgotten how to do. I stopped sleeping well. I stopped speaking to co-workers. I even stopped logging units from C2. I made up reasons, said I was reorganizing storage to shift inventory. But the truth was, I couldn't bring myself to touch anything from that fridge anymore. The hospital psychiatrist called me in after a few weeks, said staff were concerned, said I looked pale, disconnected. I lied, told him it was stress, sleep cycle imbalance, all the usual things. He nodded, prescribed a break. I didn't take it. My last night, at St. Rowena's, I left early, something I never did. I couldn't handle the room anymore. I told myself I'd return the next night, but I didn't. I never set foot in that hospital again. And yet, sometimes I still hear the hum of the fridges in my head when it's quiet, and in mirrors. Sometimes, late at night, I think I see her behind me, not angry, not vengeful, just cold. They kept using the fridge after she died, as though nothing happened, as though forgetting was the proper protocol. But she didn't forget, and neither did I. I think that's why she came to me. I was the only one who saw her as more than a note in an incident report. I saw her, I remembered her, and I can't stop. The last thing I remember from that room was the chill that seeped into my bones, even though the temperature was normal. It wasn't about cold air. It was something deeper, like she had left a part of herself in that space, and it had found a home in me. Sometimes, I wonder if the others ever hear the fridge hum at night and feel uneasy, if they sense something wrong, but push past it for the sake of routine. Maybe they're too rational, too clinical. Maybe that's how they survive in there. But I didn't survive. I just left. But I didn't survive. And when I dream now, She's still there, standing quietly beside C2, the door wide open, waiting for someone to see her, to remember her, to not let her be forgotten again. It was always too cold in the lower levels, colder than it needed to be. The walls dripped with condensation, and the hum of refrigeration units sounded more like distant moaning if you stood still long enough. I used to wonder if that cold was meant only to preserve the blood, or if it was hiding something more. Down there, the temperature felt like memory, frozen and echoing. My name is Craig. I'm 39 years old. I worked in the blood storage and retrieval section of a major trauma hospital in Michigan. Officially, I was a lab technician, but really, I was just a quiet guy in a coat pushing coolers up and down forgotten hallways. When I first took the job, I liked the silence. After my wife died in her sleep from an aneurysm 2 years ago, I craved silence like a drug, but I didn't understand then how silence could rot, ferment, turn into something else entirely. The corridor outside the sub-level 3 blood bank was long, low-ceilinged, and windowless. My workspace sat behind 2 steel security doors, one to the refrigerated vault, the other to my little glass-walled lab. That room was where I thawed, labeled, tested, and logged every unit of blood that came in or went out. There were no windows, just a flickering LED panel above, and a hum that seemed to come from inside the walls. It started with the mislabeled bags. At first I thought it was human error, a unit of O negative marked as AB positive, another with no ROD factor listed at all. Then came the donor codes, strings of numbers that didn't match any system we used. I'd scan them, and the software would freeze, then crash completely. But when I looked at the printed logs, those codes weren't there. They had never been printed. Or maybe they had, and someone had erased them. I reported it once. My supervisor brushed it off, saying the digital interface had glitches, but when I pressed, I noticed his eyes flick away, like he didn't want to look at me too long. That night, I stayed late to sort the backlog myself. I opened the storage vault alone. A rush of icy air hit me like a slap. I set down the first cooler. It was heavier than usual. Inside were 4 bags. 3 were standard, but the 4th, it was sealed in a bag I didn't recognize. Not a blood bank bag. Thicker, darker, with no visible tubing. It was opaque and slick to the touch, like wet leather. The label was smeared, but I saw one thing clearly. It was dated 1973. No barcode, no donor ID. Just that year. And the word reclamation handwritten in faded red ink. I shouldn't have touched it, but I couldn't help it. I slid it under the examination light, and something about the liquid inside, it shimmered. Not in a beautiful way, in a wrong way, like oil on water. It didn't slosh right, didn't settle when I placed it down. It kept pulsing, gently, but definitely pulsing. I backed away. The room suddenly felt too full, not noisy, but full, like something was breathing just behind the refrigerator units. I turned, and of course there was nothing. That night, I had the first dream. I was standing in the blood vault, but all the bags had burst. The floor was submerged in blood up to my knees, and something under it, under the liquid, was knocking. The next morning, the unit I found was gone. Not logged, not stored, just gone. I confronted my supervisor. He claimed no knowledge. When I insisted, he smiled, flat, lifeless, and said, "Some blood's not meant to be used, Craig. Some blood's just here to remember." I couldn't sleep after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that bag, pulsing, breathing, and the vault doors creaking open by themselves. Something trying to come through. Something that remembered being alive, but wasn't anymore. I started going through the older logs, paper logs, deep storage, where records hadn't been digitized. I found entries for blood bags never used, never issued, marked, unlisted transfer, same donor code, reclamation. Going back decades, I went back to the vault that night. I needed to see if there were more. There were, an entire drawer, 12 bags, all identical, all sealed in that wet black material, all labeled with the same year, 1973, the same word, reclamation. I reached for one, my glove tore, just a nick. It didn't touch the blood, but when I closed the vault again, I heard it, a heartbeat, no, not mine, from inside the drawer, a slow wet beat, thump, thump. I stared at the steel door, and then something inside me, something I don't like to name, begged to open it again, to let it out. I left. I ran up those stairs, and I didn't look back. I handed in my resignation the next day. They didn't even argue, didn't ask why, didn't ask for notice. They just nodded, like they already knew. I moved 3 states away. I started working in a small clinic. No vaults, no lower levels, but I haven't slept right in months. I still dream of the blood vault, still hear the knocking, and sometimes when it's really quiet, I swear I hear the cooler humming again. That same sound, like a breath, or a memory that refuses to die. I think about those bags a lot, about how old blood is supposed to be destroyed after 42 days. But they've been kept alive for 50 years. Why? And what do they remember? I don't think they were ever meant for transfusion. I think they're being kept alive on purpose, like jars of anger, like grief you bottle instead of healing. I don't know who ordered it. I don't want to know, but I think something lives inside them, and I think one day, someone's going to open the wrong drawer, and that memory, whatever it is, won't want to be alone anymore. I left the hospital, but I don't think it left me. Some nights I still wake up with blood on my hands, even though I haven't touched a unit in over a year. Some stains I think aren't meant to fade. They just sink deeper, like breath under ice. It's always cold in the red room. Not the kind of cold you can fix with a sweater or a hot drink, but the kind that sits in your bones and makes your breath feel heavier. The fluorescent lights hum, but never flicker. There's no wind, no clocks, no sound beyond the occasional slow drip from somewhere behind the wall. If time can stop, it does so here. My name is Dennis. I'm 39. For 8 years, I was a night technician at St. Eldon's Blood Bank. I used to think I could handle anything the graveyard shift threw at me. Long silences, sudden emergencies, mechanical groans. I liked being unseen. That changed 2 years ago. I haven't stepped into another medical facility since. I can't. I just can't. The Red Room wasn't always called that. Its real name is Storage B, one of the older climate-controlled wings, where we kept long-term blood donations and rare-type plasma reserves. Most people avoided it because of how remote it was from the rest of the blood center. Even during the day, the hallway leading to it seemed darker than it should have been, and at night, when the HVAC kicked in, it sounded like whispering. I first started noticing oddities around my 3rd month in the Red Room. We'd gotten a shipment in, a double order of O negative, meant for an oncology transfer, standard intake. I wheeled in the containers and logged each bag by serial, but when I went to retrieve one the next night, the tag didn't match anything in the system. It wasn't even in our font, just handwritten numbers. That's not protocol. I brought it up to Meredith, the supervisor on call, but she just laughed it off, said it was probably a mislabel from the satellite clinic. It happens, she told me, even though I knew it didn't. Still, I let it go until it happened again and again. Each time, the bags looked older, more worn. Some even had tiny cracks at the seam, like they'd been sealed decades ago. But when I scanned them, the system would blink and reject them. No record, no source, no expiration. One night, I opened one. I know how bad that sounds. I know the rules, but curiosity outpaces caution at 3:42 a.m. When the lights hum too loud and the air feels too still, I punctured the seal under the hood and drew a tiny sample into a sterile vial. It smelled wrong, not spoiled, exactly, but thick, metallic. Yes, but also earthy, like soil and copper and something older than either. I sent it to analysis anonymously, just labeled it unknown sample. 2 days later, the lab tech told me the blood was still alive. Still alive. Red blood cells begin degrading hours after collection, days at most, even in storage. But this sample showed high viability, like it had just been drawn. No trace of anticoagulant, no donor ID, and something else, she said. Low-frequency magnetic activity, like a weak pulse. She laughed when she said it, but I didn't. Back in the red room, I started hearing footsteps behind the walls, just once or twice, then regularly, rhythmic, as if someone or something was pacing in the crawl space behind the refrigeration units. I asked maintenance if there were ducts or utility tunnels back there, but they told me it was all solid concrete. That's when I began locking the storage door behind me. Even during my shifts, I stopped listening to music. I needed to hear everything, every creak, every breath. It escalated. One night, the power flickered for just a second, just long enough for the overheads to shut off and the emergency lights to kick in. I stood perfectly still in the cold red glow and saw movement in the far corner. A shape, slender, pale. It didn't rush me or make a sound. It just stood there, half inside the shadows of the metal racks, half exposed in that bloody light. I blinked. It was gone, but one of the blood bags was missing from the shelf it had been hanging from just seconds earlier. I stopped sleeping after that. I started documenting everything. Photos, serial numbers, logs, even sound recordings. Most nights, the tapes were silent, but a few captured something else. A low muttering, unintelligible, layered like static made of voices. I brought one of the tapes to the pathology lead. He said it was corrupted. I didn't tell him it was recorded straight from my phone. No filters, no edits. I was spiraling, and I knew it, but I also knew what I saw and what I felt. Then came the knock. That's the moment I knew I couldn't work there anymore. It was 4:17 a.m. I was alone in the red room, double-checking counts for a weekend dispatch. The hallway beyond the main door was empty. Always was. But then I heard a soft, deliberate knock. Not at the front, from behind me, from inside the wall. 3 knocks. Slow, close. I froze. The hair on my arms lifted. I turned slowly, staring at the metal paneling of the refrigeration unit. Nothing. Then another knock. Closer this time. I dropped everything and ran. Didn't finish the logs. Didn't even clock out. I never went back. I tried reporting it, but the report vanished. I checked a week later. No record of it. Meredith said she never got it. HR brushed me off. Stress-related hallucinations, they said. Maybe they were right. Maybe I broke. But the worst part, 2 months later, I got a box delivered to my home. No return address, just my name on the label. Inside were 3 blood bags. No labels, no barcodes, just handwritten numbers. They're still in my basement fridge. I've never opened them, but I can feel them down there, like a heartbeat under the floorboards. And sometimes, when I can't sleep, I swear I hear a knock. The kind you answer without thinking. This story, if you can even call it that, isn't about ghosts or demons or urban legends. It's about presence, residue, whatever we discard when we bleed, and why some of it refuses to die. Some blood isn't meant to be stored. Some blood remembers. I think the red room remembers me too. They say blood has memory. I used to laugh at that, chalk it up to superstition or poetic nonsense. After 15 years as a night shift phlebotomist and technician in a regional blood bank, I believed in rules, in temperature logs, in clean data and tested labels. Now I believe in something else too. Something colder, something colder, something waiting. My name is Valerie. I'm 42. When I started working nights, it was for the quiet, the steady rhythm, the sanctuary of the lab. But I never thought a job like mine, clinical, methodical, could lead me to fear opening a refrigerator. Yet here I am, afraid of the hum, afraid of what it hides. It started with the wrong blood type. I was doing routine cross-checks for a trauma center shipment. One of the O-neg bags set off a compatibility alert. Not uncommon, but when I scanned the barcode, it registered AB positive. I checked the label again, still marked O-neg, in our usual font, batch code, everything. The software flagged it as corrupted data. I flagged it as a fluke, but then it happened again, and again. The problem wasn't just the label mismatch. It was the blood itself. It looked different, slightly darker than normal, more viscous. It clung to the vial, as if reluctant to move. When I tried to log it for discard, the system wouldn't let me. Protected sample, it said. I'd never seen that term before. I asked Mitchell, the lab manager. He frowned, said it was probably a test batch, or a researcher's sample. You know how the higher-ups are, he muttered, always leaving things they shouldn't. But I could tell even he was rattled. Then came the name. One of the bags had a name printed on the tag. We don't do that. Donor IDs are anonymous, kept in a secured system, but this tag read, Jacob L. Ferris. I didn't recognize the name, and when I searched it in the archive, nothing came up. No donor ID, no record, no testing log. I asked around casually. No one had heard of him. To know Ferris in the volunteer registry, the lab records, or even in our staff history, but I couldn't stop thinking about the name. So I looked it up online. Jacob Ferris, a phlebotomist who used to work here, died in 1998. Suicide. The article was brief. He was found in the storage wing during an overnight shift, locked inside one of the walk-in freezers. They said he had injected himself with an unfiltered batch of infected blood. Nobody knew why. That wing had been closed since before I was hired, till we called it the cold hall, supposedly condemned. But when I passed it during one of my late-night supply runs, I saw the light was still on. Curiosity is a dangerous thing on night shift. The door was unlocked. Inside was dust, silence, and the overwhelming smell of sterilizer, so strong it made my eyes water. The freezer, where he was found, had been sealed shut with rusted bolts, but one had snapped, like someone had tried to open it from the inside. I swear to you, it was colder than it should have been. After that night, things changed. The alarm started going off. Just for a second. Temperature breaches, door ajar warnings, but always when I was the only one on duty, always cleared before morning. Then there were the messages. They weren't on the system. They were on paper, slips of paper tucked into my coat pocket, or wedged into the rim of a drawer. Always the same handwriting, neat, tall, slanted, always the same note. They're still here. Once there was a second line, scribbled fast, almost angry. We made a mistake. I tried to stay away from the cold hall, but I began seeing Jacob's name in the logs again. Not as a donor, but as a technician, as if he had never died, as if he had just finished a shift. To one of the system printouts even listed him as the verifying tech for a plasma batch that had been processed that very night. I showed it to Mitchell. He looked pale, and took the sheet from me, without a word. The next day, it was gone. System glitch, he told me. I knew he was lying, but I started hearing footsteps again. Not down the hall, inside the storage room. They were wet, dragging, like someone walking with a limp. One night, I locked myself in the technician station, watched the monitors from the corner screen, and I saw it. A figure in scrubs, back turned, standing in the refrigerated unit where we store expired samples awaiting destruction. He didn't move, just stood there for 12 minutes. When I finally worked up the nerve to go check, the unit was empty, but the glass was fogged over, and there was a bloody handprint on the inside of the door. Not fresh, smudged, old, like it had been wiped clean a dozen times, but never quite disappeared. I didn't quit then. I should have, but I needed proof, so I brought a camera, set it up in the cold hall, aimed at the sealed freezer, motion activated. It recorded 2 nights in a row. Nothing. The third night, it caught something. At 3:13 a.m., the freezer door creaked, not opened, just trembled. Then it stopped, then again harder, like something was pushing from inside, and then a hand emerged, just for a second, pale, long fingers, bruised knuckles, scraping against the inside glass. Then it vanished. I showed it to Mitchell. He deleted the footage. I turned in my resignation the next day. I still dream about the hand. Sometimes it knocks on the inside of my bedroom closet. Sometimes it taps the mirror when I look too long. And every now and then, I get letters. No return address, just a single sheet of paper, folded 3 times. They're still here. They say blood has memory. I think that's true, but I think it also has hunger, and regret, and maybe even loneliness. Something was left behind in the cold hall. Maybe a man, maybe something else, but whatever it is, it remembers us, and it wants to be remembered. Whatever they did to Jacob Ferris, it didn't end with him, and I'm afraid it won't end with me either.